Some relationships begin through chance encounters and gradually become an essential part of our lives. But there are times when, despite many reasons, we can no longer walk the same path together. Sometimes it's due to changes within us. Other times it's external influences that cause the harmony to fade. And so, whether we want it or not, the path that two people once walked together must part ways. When parting ways, the last thing each person can do for the other is to hold on to the most beautiful moments, the sweet memories both have created together. But there is something more important than all of that: the ability to forgive. Forgiving, not just the other person, but also yourself. Forgiveness is not easy, especially when each person carries their own wounds and pains. But it's through forgiveness that we can ease our hearts, allowing the relationship, even though it's over, to continue in some other form, perhaps even as a friendship. This doesn't mean we forget everything or erase the pain from the past, but it gives each other a chance not to become enemies. Because, deep inside, no matter how difficult the emotions are, forgiveness is the first step toward living without the weight of the past. There's a saying that you once shared with me: forgiveness is what should be done, no matter how hard it is. If there are still feelings involved, forgiveness will help sustain the relationship, at least in some form. But if the other person leaves, perhaps for a reason, forgiveness becomes a greater challenge. Still, the important thing isn't about holding on, but allowing yourself to be free from negative emotions. Often we ask ourselves, should we forgive those who have betrayed us? And these thoughts, though very human, only bring more pain and anger. Forgiveness is not about accepting the wrong actions, but freeing our souls from negative emotions to find peace. Forgiveness is a gift not only for others, but first and foremost, for ourselves. However, forgiveness is not always simple, especially when the wounds are deep and hard to heal. People who live in a state of hurt, such as parents for their children, may have to continue living together despite unresolved wounds. In these cases, forgiveness is not just about letting go, but a way for them to learn how to coexist, face difficult emotions, yet still maintain respect and avoid causing further harm to each other. Though painful, sometimes forgiveness is the only way for each person to move forward in life without being trapped in the past. When the feeling of not being able to forgive, yet also not being able to walk away from the other person arises, many of us choose to endure. We stay busy with work or find other distractions to temporarily forget the pain. However, beneath the calm exterior, negative emotions still simmer, and this not only affects ourselves, but can also negatively impact those around us, especially our children. Perhaps you've felt that exhaustion. When we haven't forgiven, the false peace is just a facade. We try to keep everything calm in front of others, but as soon as we return home, old wounds flare up, making the atmosphere at home tense and heavy. Every conversation, even the smallest, can easily bring up unhealed pain, causing both people to continue suffering. And perhaps you've also felt the internal tug of war, when in moments of weakness, the negative energy inside us can easily show through our words, actions, or even vague thoughts. We don't want to hurt others, but the unresolved pain makes us more sensitive, prone to negative reactions, and inadvertently hurting the other person. These emotions, no matter how much we try to control them, will come out when we least expect it. But the scariest thing might be the silent destruction from within. When we have to live with the other person every day and they still don't recognize the harm they've caused, the pain inside us grows deeper. Thoughtless actions, unempathetic words feel like knives cutting into our hearts. And when we can't face our emotions, we gradually feel life becoming suffocating, as there's no space left in our souls for peace. However, to address this issue, it's important for us to acknowledge that we have not yet forgiven. This is the first step in recognizing where we stand in this journey. Saying to the other person, "I still can't forgive you," is not a sign of weakness, but a way to help both of us understand that, although we may appear normal on the outside, we still carry unresolved pain inside. This helps prevent any misunderstanding that everything is fine, thus avoiding unintentionally causing more harm. The journey of forgiveness is not a hasty decision, but a process. If today you can't forgive, set a goal for yourself to learn to let go in the future when your emotions have settled. Forgiveness is not something that happens in a single moment, but a learning process, a step-by-step journey to regain peace in the soul. So, how do we know when we've truly forgiven? This is a very difficult question because sometimes we think we've forgiven when the emotions subside, but in reality, the wounds still smolder within us. Old hurts may be triggered in sensitive moments when small mistakes made by the other person remind us of the past. At that moment, the question arises again: have I truly forgiven, or is this just a forced act because I don't want to face myself? True forgiveness happens when we no longer feel pain or resentment when we remember the past. Only then can we truly say that we have forgiven. And when faced with the decision to forgive in a relationship full of hurt, we will always wonder if it is the right decision. When the heart has been hurt too much, sometimes we feel we cannot forgive anymore, and every word or action feels like an absolute avoidance. But at this moment, we must face that pain so we don't remain trapped in the past and can find a way out for ourselves. The human heart, despite carrying much pain, always yearns for peace. The line, "peace for a moment to soften the heart," from the song Bin Yin, serves as a profound reminder of the power of stillness. Perhaps the person who wrote this line deeply experienced the sense of peace when the heart is lightened, calming chaotic emotions and allowing the soul to return to a soft and serene state. At first, when the pain is too great, we often think we can never forgive. It feels like the wound will never heal, and our hearts will never be able to forgive the one who caused the hurt. But sometimes, in a lucky moment, we allow ourselves to let go. We no longer cling to the other person, no longer demand compensation or change. We simply accept things as they are, and in that acceptance, peace gradually returns. It is this peace that creates the condition for our hearts to return to softness, opening naturally. When true peace is present, everything around us seems to shine. As the song Bin Yin says, "Peace for the flower to greet, peace for the moon to wish, peace for the waves to gently cradle the shore." When the soul is tangled in pain, even if flowers bloom before us, we can't see their beauty. But when peace arrives, everything is illuminated, and our hearts become light. We become more attuned to the good things, knowing what we should do and what we should avoid. In the stillness, we no longer demand that the other person make amends for the hurt. Instead, we feel our hearts open, not to punish, but to understand and help. Peace transforms us from someone full of resentment into someone who can offer forgiveness, from someone suffering into someone willing to share and help. When true peace comes, everything changes in a miraculous way. At first, we may be determined not to forgive, even not wanting to meet the other person. But once peace settles in the soul, we begin to see something deeper. The challenges the other person brought are not just pain, but an opportunity for both of us to grow. The line in Bin Yin, "Thanks to this person for making me struggle, I was able to grow," is a profound realization. Difficulties, though painful, are valuable lessons that help us become stronger and more mature. When viewed from this perspective, we feel gratitude rather than resentment. However, the process of forgiveness is not always simple. Although we know that forgiveness is the best path, not only freeing ourselves, but also bringing peace to those around us, especially our children, sometimes the pain is still too deep, not yet healed. The desire to forgive may exist in our minds, but the heart may not yet be ready. Despite our efforts, sometimes the wounds are not healed enough to forgive completely, and that is something we need to accept in our journey. For forgiveness is a process, not an immediate decision. Initial promises or actions, such as writing letters, apologizing, or declaring an intention to let go, are just the first steps. But if there are still unresolved wounds in our hearts, a single careless action from the other person can bring the pain back. That's why the process of forgiveness requires patience and time. Every step, no matter how small, demands effort from both sides for the relationship to heal. The promise of forgiveness is the first motivation, but if it stops there, it won't bring true peace. Forgiveness is a process, much like learning and growing. We shouldn't feel ashamed or defeated if we can't forgive immediately, because that's a part of the healing journey. Forgiveness frees us from the inner conflict of negative emotions, lightening the heart. However, does forgiveness truly resolve the issue, especially when the other person continues to make the same mistakes? This question makes us reflect. Sometimes, excessive forgiveness can prevent the other person from learning from their mistakes. It's like when parents are too indulgent, unintentionally reducing their children's ability to grow. So, in such cases, is forgiveness the right solution? There's an interesting metaphor to explain this issue. If a handful of salt is thrown into a small bowl of water, the water becomes salty and undrinkable. But if the same amount of salt is thrown into a large river, the water remains fresh. This story shows that pain is not only caused by the mistakes of others, but also by the capacity of our hearts. If the heart is small, even small hurts can easily knock us down. But if the heart is vast like a river, no matter how much salt there is, we can still overcome it. So how do we expand our hearts to that extent? The answer is that this process requires time, practice, and deep awareness. First, we need to understand that it's the smallness in our perspective and perception that makes us vulnerable. When we trust in the heart's ability to grow, we learn how to face suffering without letting it overwhelm us. Forgiveness is not a simple or blind act. It is a process of growth, an art that requires deep understanding, emotional restraint, and wisdom. Forgiveness is an act of a strong heart, one that is able to overcome pain and not let trivial matters obscure the happiness and peace within. The process of forgiveness is like expanding the heart, turning a small bowl of water into a vast river, capable of containing wounds and disagreements without being swept away. However, forgiveness does not always yield the desired results. In some cases, forgiveness may make the other person grateful and motivated to change, ensuring they do not repeat the mistake. But sometimes, if forgiveness is too easy or rushed, it can be taken for granted, leaving the other person unaware of the lesson and continuing to cause harm. Forgiveness is not born out of fear, nor is it a means to escape loneliness or to feel noble. If forgiveness is given simply to satisfy personal emotions, the result will not be lasting, and the other person may exploit this to continue making mistakes. True forgiveness is an act for the greater good, helping both parties reduce their pain and creating an opportunity for change. The decision to forgive does not always have to be immediately expressed. Sometimes you may be ready to forgive in your heart, but you only express it when you see the other person genuinely trying to amend their ways. Forgiving too soon just because of pressure or pleading can make you more vulnerable. Instead, patience and careful consideration will make forgiveness more meaningful and have a more positive impact. One truth that needs to be recognized is that forgiveness is not about giving up our self-worth. Many people easily confuse their mistakes or those of others as what defines them. However, each of us possesses valuable qualities and values, and forgiveness is an action that frees us from suffering, not an acceptance of a bad situation. Forgiveness is how we acknowledge growth and compassion within ourselves, instead of being trapped in pain and self-blame. Within each person lies both light and darkness, strengths and weaknesses, much like flowers and trash. Instead of only wanting to hold on to the flowers and deny the trash, we must learn to accept the existence of both. When faced with trash, instead of punishing or denying it, we need to understand the cause and learn to face it, not fight against ourselves, but work with ourselves to improve. Acceptance is not just a compromise or agreeing with the unwanted, but an attitude of acknowledging the truth and accepting the present without resistance. When we accept ourselves, we no longer push away our flaws or mistakes, but instead recognize them as part of who we are. From there, we can transform trash into flowers, the lessons from hardships that help us grow. This applies not only to ourselves, but also to others. Forgiving someone begins with accepting them as they are, acknowledging that mistakes have happened and cannot be changed, but we can choose how to face it and learn from it. When there is no resistance, we can reconnect and support one another, instead of holding on to negative emotions. Accepting that no one is perfect, including ourselves and others, will help us become more compassionate. When we forgive ourselves, we can truly forgive others. This opens the path to kindness, not only towards ourselves, but also to those around us. The story of the plant in California, with its dry leaves nourishing the flowers, is a beautiful image of transformation and rebirth. The past, whether painful or difficult, does not disappear but becomes part of the present. Parents, those who raised and taught us, always live on in every action, thought, and value they passed on. Living kindly, taking care of ourselves and our loved ones is the best way to make up for the shortcomings we feel towards them. Instead of living according to societal expectations or the need to always be perfect, we need to learn to accept ourselves. Self-appreciation is, in fact, the key to creating a meaningful and peaceful life. When we understand and love ourselves, we can easily love others, and through that, we create an environment full of love and connection. Forgiveness, whether for ourselves or others, is a precious gift we can give to ourselves and our loved ones. However, even after forgiving, feelings of guilt or hurt may still linger, preventing the soul from finding peace. The question is, how can these negative emotions gradually fade? Unhealed pain and fear will always have an impact, much like the story of the person who fears chickens. Even though they know they are not corn kernels, the fear still controls their actions. This reflects that when pain is not dealt with, it remains in the mind and influences how we react to similar situations. To heal, we need time, patience, and support from ourselves and those around us. There is a truth that we may not want to admit. Our fears and deep wounds often stem from those closest to us. The people we trust and love the most can unintentionally become the source of these pains. Parents, who we may see as our solid foundation, can sometimes, if their love lacks empathy or is too harsh and controlling, cause us to not only fail to learn emotional regulation, but also gradually feel small and invisible in a world that feels too vast. Furthermore, when parents are busy with work and do not spend time with their children, those children may feel abandoned, lost within their own home. This feeling doesn't just occur in a moment, but gradually grows over time, so that when they reach adulthood, these wounds continue to follow them, making it difficult to build strong relationships or causing feelings of emotional deprivation and disconnection. So how can we overcome feelings of guilt and wounds that we sometimes wish to forget? The first step is to acknowledge that they exist. Don't quickly deny or avoid them, but instead, face them and truly feel them. Only when we recognize and accept those feelings can we begin to find the path to healing. At that point, it's not just understanding from others, but the empathy from within ourselves that becomes the key to unlocking peace. Like the story of the corn kernel, sometimes we cannot simply say that we have moved on. It's not just about healing wounds, but about changing the way we view ourselves. Past wounds, though they make us doubt ourselves, cannot define who we are if we learn to look at them in the right way. We still have many values, potentials, and positive qualities that are worth cherishing. Today, we witness a generation of young people easily swept up in emotional storms, with depression seeming to be an inseparable part of life. One reason for this is that the modern world no longer presents as many material challenges as before. In the past, the difficulties of life forced us to develop resilience and face adversity. But today, with everything being easier, we lack opportunities to build coping skills. This feeling makes life's pressures sometimes feel like an overwhelming burden. The pace of modern life also causes generations to drift further apart. Parents are busy with work and sometimes forget that their children need to be listened to, need attention, and emotional sharing. Instead of creating warm spaces where children can find comfort, they unintentionally treat them like employees, creating an invisible gap in the relationship. And this, though unintentional, makes young people feel lonely, deprived of care, and even more closed off from themselves. When there is a lack of sharing and empathy, psychological wounds can deeply embed themselves in the heart, making it difficult to heal. Even if one wants to forgive, the pain lingers, lasting, especially when the hurt involves those we love most. And from there, forgiveness becomes more challenging than ever, because the pain is not just visible scars, but deep wounds in the soul, gradually eroding and making the heart heavier. To heal these deep wounds, perhaps the only path is to return to oneself, to seek stillness, and listen to the inner emotions. One of the simplest yet most effective methods is to observe and accept those feelings with clarity. When feelings of pain or hurt unexpectedly rise, instead of rushing to escape or deny them, imagine embracing those emotions as you would a hurt child, with all the love and tenderness you can muster. Only when we face the pain patiently, without judgment, can it gradually diminish. The most important thing in this process is full presence in the present moment. When you truly focus on your feelings, not to judge or react, but to understand and accept them, the wound will begin to heal. The pain may not disappear instantly, but if you allow it to exist without avoiding it, the wound will not persist. On the contrary, if we ignore it, allowing negative emotions to spread unchecked, these wounds won't heal on their own. They may even worsen, making our souls more tired and burdened. In reality, forgiveness is a journey that's not easy. But when the person who caused the hurt is someone you love, the pain and anger are much deeper. This pain does not only come from being hurt, but also from the helplessness of seeing those we care about being harmed, hurt by the closest person. To forgive, we must face our emotions, accept that the wounds have occurred, and gradually release them through understanding. Forgiveness is not just an act towards others, but also an act of forgiveness and compassion for ourselves. When witnessing a loved one being hurt, sometimes we feel pain that is many times greater than our own. This is because we see our loved ones as an inseparable part of ourselves. When they hurt, that pain feels as if it directly touches our ego, our soul. The feelings of helplessness, sorrow, and worry for them seem to consume our entire mind, making us want to protect them from all harm, even though we might not be able to do much. Part of this pain comes from imagining that our loved ones cannot bear the pain, or that they lack the ability to protect themselves or heal. For example, when a child witnesses their mother being hurt by their father, the pain often doesn't just come from the mother's hurt, but from the child's own sense of helplessness in not being able to protect her from that pain. But in reality, everyone has different levels of resilience, and we cannot fully understand someone else's experience. Each person has their own way of healing and facing pain. In many cases, the pain we feel is not only for our loved ones, but also because it awakens old wounds within us. When a situation similar to past hurts arises, it feels as though the wounds from the past are reopened, and we cannot help but react. Sometimes, our desire to protect others is actually a way to protect ourselves from those painful memories. This can make us unaware that we are acting out of fear and unresolved pain within ourselves. If we are not careful, we might convince ourselves that we are heroes, acting for the benefit of others. But in reality, these reactions often stem from fear, insecurity, and unresolved hurt within us. Instead of truly helping, we sometimes fall into judgment and control, which only makes the situation more tense and does not bring positive results. Forgiveness is a profound process that requires patience. It is not a hasty action or something driven by momentary emotion. True forgiveness can only come when you have healed from within, when your soul is at peace, and you are ready to look at things gently, without judgment. The healing process, which leads to forgiveness, begins with clearly identifying the wounds within. First, you need to acknowledge your emotions: anger, pain, helplessness, without concluding that these emotions define you. They are simply part of your journey, not what makes you who you are. When you perceive it this way, the wound begins to lighten. Next, it's important to understand the origin of the hurt. Distinguishing between the pain caused by a loved one and the pain from past wounds is crucial. This helps prevent overreaction or confusion, because when you understand the source, you won't let old emotions cloud your current feelings. After that, take care of yourself. Sometimes you need to take time alone to face yourself, to better understand your emotions. Journaling, talking with a trusted person, or simply finding a quiet space to reflect will help you move through the feelings of hurt more steadily. Self-care is not avoidance, it is the way you honor and heal yourself. Compassion is also crucial in this process. You don't have to agree with the actions of the person who caused the harm, but if you can, try to put yourself in their shoes. Understanding that they too have their own pain and limitations helps you view the situation with more empathy, rather than just focusing on your own anger. Forgiveness cannot be rushed. Don't force yourself to forgive when you're not ready. Let the healing process unfold naturally. Sometimes, giving yourself time is the best way to truly heal. And when you are truly at peace, forgiveness will come naturally and gently, not out of force. Ultimately, forgiveness is an act of liberation. You'll find that when your soul is at peace, Forgiveness is not just a gift for the other person, but a way to free yourself from the burden of pain. However, this is not always easy. In difficult situations, if you feel you are not ready, allow time to help you. Be honest with yourself. If the other person respects you, they will understand that you are trying and need more time. Sometimes, in order to truly forgive, you need to create space for yourself. Avoid too much contact with the person who caused the harm, as frequent interactions can deepen the pain. When you feel your energy draining, negative emotions can easily rise, causing more harm. The other person also needs to exercise restraint and caution, not unknowingly repeating behaviors that have caused harm before. When we face deep wounds in our hearts, temporarily reducing contact is not an act of avoidance, but a way to protect ourselves in a vulnerable stage. Just like a wounded warrior needing rest to recover, we too need a safe space to heal. If the person truly understands and respects you, they will accept this and support you in your process of finding peace. To focus on healing, we need to let go of what is not truly important. Sometimes external pressures from life only make the wounds within us heavier. Focusing on ourselves and engaging in healing practices like meditation or attending intensive retreats is a way to escape those triggers. These spaces not only help us step away from the noise, but also create a setting where we can connect with our emotions in stillness. At home, you can easily get distracted by daily concerns or unwanted interactions. But when you engage in a meditation retreat, you can look deep inside, face your emotions and wounds with peace and love. The calm energy from such spaces helps you reduce self-blame and transform your emotions with more gentleness. True healing requires a clear plan. It cannot be rushed, but needs a specific path. When the wounds have been soothed and you've learned to care for your own emotional well-being, you will begin to feel the change. At this point, you can start to open your heart to reconnect with the person who caused the harm. However, during this process, it's important to recognize that we also bear some responsibility in creating the harm, rather than placing all the blame on others. The human soul becomes more vulnerable when it lacks inner strength. At times, facing challenges and painful memories can make us feel as if we are on the verge of collapsing. But when the soul is strong and stable, all difficulties become easier to handle, and they no longer have the power to hurt us. After some time spent turning inward, we will realize that most of the harm comes from within us, not just from others. This realization helps us focus on loving and caring for ourselves first, rather than solely concentrating on forgiving others. When the soul is strong, forgiveness is no longer a burden, but becomes a natural part of the healing process. Think of the image of a wounded tiger retreating into its den to heal. We, too, need to spend time alone to care for and love ourselves. This is the only way the wound will heal, so that when we return to the outside world, we will not be hurt further. In the process of reconnecting with the person who caused the harm, observing your own emotions is crucial. If your emotions are overwhelmed, don't hesitate to ask for more time to continue healing. This doesn't mean rejecting contact, but rather respecting yourself and protecting your recovery process. Letting go of resentment and the wounds in your soul is an important step in freeing yourself from negative emotions. When you have the courage to face and acknowledge them, healing will no longer feel like a burden. Loving yourself is essential not only to healing the wounds, but also to opening up healthier relationships in the future.